the greatest of all time whenever it comes to being a general manager in the NFL and a head coach in the NFL. He'll be joining us every single Monday. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Belichick. Yeah, you look awesome.
Pat, how you doing?
What is that, Croatia? We got a Croatia
game.
What's that?
Croatia lacrosse.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are they? They a good club? They better than America? America beats the shit out of them, right?
A long way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good luck to Good luck to Croatia.
President of the country, so.
Yeah, and you were deemed the president this offseason, right? You got the full
Yeah, well, not quite. Yeah, let's stick to football.
COVID game in Carolina. There was no fans at the end of the year. They obviously come in, lay an egg. Bryce Young, now the whole conversation's going to be about him. Let's move to some other games. Last night, Sunday Night Football, the Detroit Lions win a massive one. Is there anything to gain if you're MCDC to be like, yeah, we can win the Super Bowl this year, or does it legitimize any of these big wins whenever the coaches are talking to the players afterwards or the week leading up to the next week?
Yeah, I think, look, there's a long way to go. I think there's a little bit of overreaction to everything, win and lose here. But I'd say a couple of my impressions from the weekend. Number one, on the officiating, a lot of flags, a lot of calls. Now, some of those are sloppy play by the teams, which resulted in penalties. Some of them, they're just calling things really tight, like calling, Stanley in the Baltimore-Kansas City game. Like, I mean, I don't know. Some of those are tough calls. But in any case, a lot of penalties. And I think they're trying to, set, draw the line here and set things. But I think it's tough for players. AJ, you've been there before where you just, you're not really sure how the game's going to be called. And some of those are, eliminated big plays and created some opportunities. So that's one. Two, win or lose, there's a lot of work to do here for every team. They all got a long way to go. Three, there were a lot of injuries in the league. Jordan Love's certainly been highlighted, but there have been plenty of other ones. And I think these teams are going to be, in constant flux here for the next couple of weeks in terms of still settling in on the roster. There were, I would say over 50 practice squad elevations or signings. So those guys, you can't keep doing that all year. Sooner or later, if you want to use those players, you got to get them up on the roster one way or another. So I think there's going to be a lot of personnel transition in the next couple of weeks. I think the teams are going to have to deal with a lot of injuries, not just this week, but I would anticipate the same thing happening next week as we ramp up the competition in back-to-back weeks until things settle in. And so for every team, no matter how things turned out on Sunday, I think they got to look ahead. They got to really take stock of what they need to do, how immediate it is, and how they can get better, both fundamentally and personnel-wise.
Yeah, and what you're talking about with those injuries to the bottom half of the roster, it's a lot of special teams. We saw a lot of special teams yesterday with the new kickoff, and there was a block punt in the game that I was at. There's been a couple returns already. I mean, we'll dive into all that, but that's that bottom half of that roster that if you continue to turn over, you can really – I think you can get exposed and lose a close game. Let's talk about some of these young guys, Coach. And obviously, the boys are probably going to want you to expand on those three things that you just mentioned. But the young rookies came in and looked vastly different than how they looked in a preseason. I mean, preseason, we were so excited about all these guys. And you came on, you were like, yep, can't tell shit from preseason. Very basic, very basic. Let's not overreact here is pretty much how you explain the entire situation. And then we see week one, it felt like that was the case. Is this natural for these rookies? Obviously, C.J. Stroud had an incredible run, but what should we take away from the rookie performances, and how long do you think it really takes for each individual guy to pick it up, the NFL life?
Well, I think it varies from player to player. I think that's kind of an unknown there, but I expect those the rookies, really all players, to get a lot better here in the first month of the season, and I'm sure those guys learned a lot. They saw a lot of coverages and a lot of looks and a lot of things that they didn't see in preseason. Or maybe they just saw from their defense in practice that they kind of got used to. So I'd say the big thing to take away for me was, the lack of, I would say, overall production in the passing game. So 8 quarterbacks had an under 75 quarterback rating. The pass length for some of those, like Jaden Daniels, his average pass length was less than 2 yards. Now, he had good yards after catch on that, but, Nix was a little over 2 yards. Watson was a little over 2 yards. Murray was a little over 2 yards. That's the average pass length. Caleb Williams is 3 yards. So, I mean, some of these guys, even the passes they're completing, aren't for very many yards. And, they're just totally counting on, run after catch. And and trying to protect the quarterback. So, there was 7 or 8 quarterbacks that.
Coach, is that scheme based or is that like decision based? Why does that happen with you?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a lot of quick throws to try to get it out of the quarterback's hand and hope they can gain some yards running with it. But I'd say it's really a lack of execution in the intermediate passing game. Now that's not the whole league, but I mean you've got almost half the league that threw for less than 175 yards, and I think this is the fewest touchdown passes that we've had in week 1 in in quite a long time. I think 5 years ago there was not quite twice as many, but almost twice as many. And so as a result, you saw 19 field goals over 50 yards. So that's a lot of field goal kicking that didn't turn into touchdowns, and a lot of good field goal kicking. So I thought there were some interesting takeaways. We'll see how much that improves, but it looked like there was a number of teams that really couldn't throw the ball for one reason or another, whether that was protection, whether it was guys not being open, whether it was quarterback execution or overall team execution. And again, those teams are really going to have to work on that this week to be competitive in this league. You just can't win in the National Football League unless you can throw the ball and defend the passing game. So, sooner or later that's gonna come into play.
Go ahead, AJ.
Coach, we saw some teams kind of dig themselves into a hole, and we saw some great comebacks week 1. And I'm hearing a lot about like the halftime adjustments that happen. And that's always like a debate. How much, like as a coach, you've done it forever. How much can you get done at halftime, and can you really kind of turn the tide for your team if things aren't going well?
Well, I think AJ, I think you got to try to start sooner than that, and try to figure out what's going on, especially in the opener when you prepare for so much, and then you see how the game unfolds in the first 2 or 3 possessions. That here's what they're going to try to do to us, and here's how they're going to try to play the game. But to your point, sometimes you really need that time at halftime to say, okay, look, here's some changes we're going to make that are not just that simple. It really needs a good talking through to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So I think there's a little bit of a combination of both. I think there's some initial reaction that you need to settle down, and then sometimes when it involves multiple groups, like checks on defense, or maybe an adjustment in the coverage, or an adjustment in your protections, or maybe putting in a new combination route, to take advantage of a certain coverage, that those take a little bit more time. And sometimes I've had those conversations in the middle of the second quarter saying, all right, look, let's just take care of that at halftime and not deal with it right now. It's just there's too much going on.
Yeah, but we've seen those mic'd up clips of you back whenever you're like 24 years old. That's why the thought of you going back and being just a DC that got kind of pitched by, and obviously you said you're a big fan, this was just news that was outside of the world. The thought of you just being a DC again and getting back in that thing was wild because of all the mic'd up shit. But like the thought of you need to start before halftime if we're going to be making any adjustments is such a hilarious answer from Bill Belichick, because that makes sense. That seemingly makes sense.
Pat, when you really think about it, to me, I always saw the game as 3 quarters. I saw it in thirds. You have the first quarter, you have the second quarter, you have the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter is really situational. By that time, everything's been declared for the most part, how you're going to play the game, how they're going to play the game. And then if you're ahead or you're behind, then the fourth quarter becomes much more a situational game. So I saw it as first, second, and third quarters as being a third of the game. And then the fourth quarter really at that point is either situational, or you have so much information about the game that, you're making your decisions based on what you've seen in the first 3 quarters. So that's kind of the way I looked at the game.
Now,
so I don't want to wait till halftime. To me, the game's 2/3 over at halftime in terms of making adjustments. I felt like, you got to go quicker than that.
And
Ernie, one thing that's hard is these script teams, the West Coast teams, that script the first 10 or 15 plays. A lot of times that screws you up because that's not really what they want to do. That's just how they want to start the game, and sometimes you just can't lock in too much on that. Well, like this is what they're trying to do. No, that play just fell into the script because they want to break a tendency, or they want to try to foul you up somehow early in the game. But once the game settles in, then I think you've got to react to the game. You can't just wait till halftime to make adjustments.
When do you have a feel on what the other team's trying to do? End of first quarter, beginning of second quarter, when?
Well, usually a couple of series, I'd say defensively, depending on how long the series are. But, until they've had 3 or 4 third downs, until they've had, half a dozen, maybe 8 to 10 early down plays, it's 15, 16 plays, somewhere in that neighborhood. You usually have a pretty good idea of what it's going to be.
And how
now,
much,
sometimes that can get skewed a little bit, like at the first 20 plays, half of them are in your red area for whatever reason. They drive down and run 5 or 6 plays, kick a field goal, and then they get down there again and they run, now half your plays are in the red area. So that red area is declared, maybe out in the field hasn't, or vice versa. Maybe you haven't seen them in the red area yet. But I think by the end of this first quarter, you should have a pretty good idea of how they're trying to play you today.
who's somebody that got you a couple times? Anybody because I know you and Peyton have massive respect for each other. Was that like a chess game between you and Peyton? And who was?
Well, Peyton's offense was all check with me at the line of scrimmage. So whatever play he called, he would look at the defense because they never motioned. They always gave you the same 2x2 set, and then based on how you aligned, then if he didn't like what they had called, then he would make a protection adjustment, a route adjustment, or change the running play. But I would say, Shanahan, both Mike and Kyle were very balanced guys. So when you go against them, as soon as it looked like this was starting to be a little bit of a trend, then they would do something to counter it. And so you had to think of them as of balance, right? The trend was balance. So if things tilted towards runs or passes or directional plays more to the right than the left or things like that, then you could almost count on him balancing it out so that in the end, you couldn't get a read on which way it was going or whether it's a run pass tendency and so forth, that they were kind of 50-50 on most everything except for third and long.
We will talk about Kyle Shanahan's offense later in this discussion because massive Monday Night Football game. But before that, Ty has a question for you about this week.
Yeah, Coach, Jim Harbaugh, and you just mentioned it there about how, guys are going to get better over the course of the first month of the season. But Jim Harbaugh said in the locker room after the Chargers win, hey, while it's a long season, the most important area of growth or where you're going to grow the most as a team is going to be between weeks 1 and 2. Do you agree with that sentiment? And if you do or if you don't, why do you think that is, that teams oftentimes will show the most amount of growth or the most important area of growth as a team over weeks 1 and 2?
Well, I think because in week 1, it's now clear to you. You can talk about things in preseason, what you feel like you're good at or not good at, but you don't really know. Once you come out of week 1 against at least the opponent that you played against, which is some indication, you can come out of there and feel like, all right, well, we need to work on this. And, it looks like we're going to be okay here. And, maybe some of the guys you have questions about, answer those questions with their play in that game one way or the other. And then you have a lot more to work with. But I would say the other point of growth for a team during the year is at whatever point there's a crisis, right? At some point there's a crisis with your team, and how do you respond to that team? The kind of the on to Cincinnati story or something like that. If we got crushed in Kansas City, that week became really probably the biggest in that particular season, the 14th season, the biggest week of the season for us, not the opener. So it just kind of depends. But I think when your season hits that crisis point of a tough loss or it could be a big win that gives your team a lot of confidence, or your quarterback getting injured, Brady coming in there winning a couple of big games, beating Cleveland and so forth in 2001, beating Miami, sometimes those games are the ones that really solidify and crystallize your team. You just don't know when they're coming. But when they're there, you realize this is an important week for us.
Do you think the crisis automatically makes everybody hyper-focused more and re-perspective things? Do you think that is the reason why those are the weeks where things really tighten back up almost?
Well, yeah, I think there's sometimes where you realize that this is it. Like, we either get it going here or we're going to be in a lot of trouble. We're either going to close the gap to tied for the lead in the division, or we're going to fall 2 games back with 5 games to go, or whatever the circumstances are. It becomes pretty obvious that this is the key time for us here. If things don't go well, we're going to really put ourselves in a tough position.
Let's go to some key times for. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask about Ernie, and I stepped on you 3 times. I didn't want to do that. What was Ernie doing up there? We obviously watch all the Do Your Jobs, and I think I heard him on Games with Names with Edelman, and he sounds awesome. Yep. Everybody loves him. During games, was he just figuring my vision of him is the Zach Galifianakis thing at the blackjack table where he's counting the cards and he just knows what's going on, but for football. Is that an accurate depiction of who Ernie? Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay.
First analytics department.
Ever first analytics guy of all time.
Yeah, and there was no. I mean, he wasn't really a chart guy. He just knew everything. But yeah, Ernie was on with every play. So he was on when we were on offense and we were on defense. He would flip over if there were any decisions to be made in terms of taking or declining a penalty, 2-point plays, anything like that. Fourth down situations, what to do. I would consult with him on every one of those. And then a lot of times after the series, I would go back and talk to him on a telephone so I wouldn't tie everybody else up on the line and just say, after a couple of series, hey, Ernie, what's this look like here? And he'd say, well, it looks like we can pass block him, but we're not going to be able to run block him today. And, let's forget about the running game. And we need to start throwing the ball or whatever the case might be. We can't match up with this receiver. We're going to have to start doubling this guy. They haven't hit him yet, but, we need to help, cover that guy. Or this is what they're trying to do. I can see what their game plan is. They haven't really hit us on it because we've been in a lot of cover 3, but these are all cover 2 beaters. They're going to try to beat us in cover 2 and, things like that. So it was really awesome.
So you two were a tag team? I mean, what are we even talking about? Sounds like these are superpowers combined. That's a weapon. That is a weapon.
Ernie's really smart. And, he had a great feel for the game, and he had a great anticipation of kind of based on who the coordinator was, who the coach was, who the players were, kind of what they would be thinking or what they have done in similar situations in the past. He had a great memory, has a great memory.
Hey, Ernie, good job, Ernie.
Legend. Thank you, Ernie.
Good job, Ernie. An extra set of eyes that are in front of a football genius mind. Yeah, just
crazy.
Hanging out, got the headset on. Come on. Right back into it. I mean, what a time. Congrats to you both. Legendary stuff. You talked about crisis time being like, hey, we got to shit or get off the pot here, or this thing's going to go first to last. There's some players that have a shit or get off the pot type career situation happening right in front of our eyes. D-Bud has a question for you.
Yeah, a lot of quarterbacks. You mentioned, the overall offensive production kind of being down, but some places where the quarterback play was kind of on point. Baker Mayfield in Tampa, Sam Darnold in Minnesota, they dialed some things up, a couple touchdowns, some 4-by-1 formation. Stroud made some plays, and also Derek Carr in New Orleans. What do those coordinators and offenses do to kind of get those quarterbacks going and putting up points and being efficient with the ball?
Yeah, well, as you know, D-Butt, the biggest thing for the quarterback is decision-making, right? So when you snap the ball and call the play and the players run their routes, you don't always know what the defense is going to be in. You have to figure out where the weak point of the defense is, which guy to throw it to. And sometimes, even if that's where you want to go, they have it taken away somehow, or and then you have to make a decision with it. And I think the big thing is, anytime that things go bad.
Things go bad right now. Freeze up. This is our
try not to lose yardage. Try not to lose yardage, and then if you can make a play, but don't make a play, make a bad play. So that's the one that always got me when the players said, "Well, I was trying to make a play." I was like, well, how about try to make a good one then? Make a bad play. So like the play that Levis had, where he gets out of the pocket, he flips the ball, underhand, backhand, whatever it was, and that's just, even if you hit it, what do you really have? Not much, and then if you don't hit it, then you lose the game. So it's just there's no upside to that play. There's only downside, and it's just. That's just a terrible decision.
Can we do some risk management, please? Can we do a little risk management, please? We're in the fourth quarter. We have a lead right now. We're giving it up. We gave it up here. Yeah. And the other team has not scored.
Yeah.
Okay, it's all been defensive. A couple of those. Steelers win without scoring a touchdown. Denver was on a run there where they had 2 safeties, 2 field goals, and then something else. And that goes back to your point, I guess, about the entire offensive production and quarterback production. A lot of bad decisions, it sounds like you think, are taking place right now for some places.
Well, no. Look. I mean, one team wins and one team loses, so there are key decisions on both sides. But I think when you look at a player like Brady, the thing that Brady, of all the great plays that he made, the thing that Brady didn't do was, he didn't have very many plays like Levis had yesterday, where he just gives the game away or makes a bad decision for the team. Tom always protected the team, and even if it wasn't a great play, at least it wasn't a bad play, which is one of the reasons why we had so few negative runs when Tom was the quarterback. It wasn't that necessarily every run was a great run, but if it was a bad run, Tom wouldn't run it. He'd find something else to do. He'd throw a look pass out to the receiver or change the play in some way, but it wasn't just, run the ball and get slaughtered for a 3-yard loss. I think he must have said, I don't know how many times yesterday in the game, in the Cleveland game, Dallas keeps going backwards. They keep losing too many yards. Well, that's the truth. The offense's job is to move the ball forward. And when you're in 2nd and long and 3rd and long, more than 10 yards, I mean, it's really impossible to have any kind of success or any kind of consistency. So just get the thing moving in the right direction. And Tom and I have talked a million times about, if you complete this pass, what's the upside? You gain 1 yard, you gain 2 yards. All right, you guys going to get tackled anyway, like the play we just saw in Tennessee. I mean, what if he had completed that? What's the upside? 2 yards? What's the downside? Lose the game. Like that's you just can't make those kind of decisions. I mean, even if that ball had been complete, there's no upside to it. And so, Tom did a great job of risk management and cut his losses. And so, rather than turn the ball over, all right, you lose a couple of yards and you get sacked, but at least we can gain our field position back by punting on 3rd down.
Coach, I don't know if you know this because you've been in an NFL building in your own silo, seemingly. The term game manager is like a slanderous term for a quarterback. It's like, why? Like, game manager is exactly what you want at quarterback. Do you agree with that, or am I wrong in that thought?
Yeah, no, 100%. The idea is to win the game. And if you have to win the game by let the defense win this game, then you put the defense in good position to let them win it. Whether it's Peyton, Drew Brees, Rodgers, Mahomes, Brady, like those guys are all great quarterbacks, but they won. The reason why they won is because they figured out what they needed to do to win in that game. And look, sometimes you got to go out and score 48 points. Sometimes you just got to not turn the ball over and give yourselves a chance to play good defense. Sometimes, again, Tom said this multiple times yesterday. It was great. I mean, I felt like, I was hearing an echo, but they're in field goal range. Don't lose yardage. You got 3 points. Yeah. And then something would happen to get a penalty or something and end up not being able to even get 3 points out of it. So, knowing where you are and not going backwards offensively when you're already in scoring range, you have a good field goal kicker. Those are things like that. I mean, you could say they're little things, but they're not little things. It's not game management. It's winning football.
Yeah. I don't know when it became, but it was wild. It just kind of like took over the internet. That guy's a game manager. It's like, no shit. Yeah, it's part of being a quarterback. Yeah. Need to manage it.
Yeah.
Need that to happen in this entire thing. Go ahead, AJ.
Coach, you mentioned Tom saying things, and it felt like it was an echo. Like, what does that feel like as a coach when you hear your former players actually, like you think, yeah, these guys actually were listening to me all this time. And when you hear them giving other people advice or coaching that you gave them, it's almost like when you see your kids doing that when they, sometimes my kids don't want to listen, but then I see my oldest telling my youngest ones like things that I have said. I'm like, okay, they actually are hearing me. Like, how does that feel as a coach?
Yeah, it's a great feeling, isn't it? No, that's a great comparison, AJ. It's similar like that with, when you hear that from your kids, you hear that from another player. But look, I would say with Tom, I learned a lot more from him than he learned from me, I'm sure. When we would sit in those meetings, look, I see the game from the sideline. I see the game from film. Tom would see the game from where he saw it from behind the center and in the pocket. And, he would say, here's what I can see. This is what's hard for me. This is what, this is why gives it away and things like that. And he taught me all the little things. With some are big things of, just how he saw the game as a quarterback and, what would happen in between plays. He'd hear somebody on the defense say something and then he'd know that would give him a tip as to what they were doing or if the guy was tired, he'd call a play and go at him again or, that type of thing. And, he could just tell sometimes by looking at guys' eyes how nervous they were trying to cover a certain receiver, and he'd throw at that guy. Those are little things that, as a coach, you just don't see. But on the field, you've seen it, AJ. There's things that you see on the field that a coach just can't pick up on film. And so, look, I learned a tremendous amount from Tom. We had a great relationship, and hopefully he learned some things from me too. But the amount that he taught me about playing quarterback and seeing the game through his eyes, that Randy Moss taught me about being a receiver. Being a fast receiver, because I'm not fast. I don't know what it's like to be fast.
What
it's like to be fast, and that taught me a lot. It was it was look, the whole game management thing. The idea is to win, and if the quarterback's job is to help the team win, and it's also his job is to help his players be productive, right, and gain yardage. And so I used to tell Tom all the time, and Tom knew it. We could never gain any yards as long as he had the ball. We would only gain yards as soon as he gave it to somebody else.
He's a 1,000 yards rusher. Remember?
No big deal.
He's a 1,000-yard rusher, right? That's the quarterback sneak he had. Every
Really
time.
good at it.
Yep.
Hey,
Every time.
The quarterback sneaks, the quarterback sneaks not included because he was great at quarterback sneaks.
Okay.
But, when he ran the ball, we didn't gain any yards. And until he threw it to somebody else, we didn't gain any yards. So the quicker the ball got out of his hands and the quicker he got it to somebody else, the more yards we were going to gain, the more points we were going to score. And that's the way he played. And that's, not to the other team, but get it to our guys and let them be productive with it. That's what good quarterbacks do.
Greatest
Now,
of all
look,
time.
if you're a quarterback like Lamar Jackson or somebody like that, yeah, he can gain some yards. Like, I get that. He can gain some yards. But Tom knew what he was and what he wasn't. And Tom's job was to get the ball to everybody else and let them gain the yards. And nobody did it better.
We're excited to watch Tom grow through the season as commentators. The internet was not kind to him,
No, they
but it's
weren't.
Tom Brady. That's going to happen. He's used to it. He's only going to work and get better. I'm excited to get smarter through listening to him as well. Connor has a question for you about one of the quarterbacks he was talking about yesterday.
Yeah, Coach, putting your GM cap on, what do you think about the Dak contract? Obviously, he becomes the first guy to make $60+ million, over the course of a season. But do you think that is something that the Cowboys had to do? And do you think they're worried at all about the, prospect of paying Dak, CD, and soon to be Micah Parsons a large portion of their cap over the next few years?
Well, Connor, look, I'll tell you, having good players is not a problem. All right, that's not a problem. The problem is when you don't have good players. So, look, they have to figure out how to do it. I think when you look at a lot of these contracts that have come through in the last year or two, at quarterback, at wide receiver, at cornerback, at pass rusher, even a defensive tackle, I think what a lot of these teams are looking at is the cap going up. And so 2 years from now, those contracts, they look high today, but 2 years from now, they'll look, probably pretty good compared to what some other guys are getting. I think when you look at what Prescott does for his team and what he's been able to accomplish, the consistency over his career, when you compare what he's making to what some other guys who are making maybe a little less than him, but kind of in that same ballpark, I think the Cowboys are pretty happy with who they have. And, I think you got to give Jerry and Steven a lot of credit for the way they've managed the team. And look, the only way you can have a good team when you have players like CeeDee Lamb and Prescott and Parsons and guys like that is you got to find some other guys that are pretty good too. And they did a great job in the kicking game coming up with Aubrey and Turpin. Those are two of the best players in the league at their position. They gave up nothing for them. And so when you have two elite players as a returner and as a field goal kicker that you basically gave up nothing for and they're, minimal charge on the salary cap, well, that's how you afford the Dak Prescotts and that's how you afford the CeeDee Lambs. You got to get guys like that. And, this guy, I would not kick it to this guy. I'll tell you that right now. I would.
So fast.
Pat, if you were punting for me, I'd say, look, either you get the ball out of bounds, all right, or, we're going to go for it on fourth down. I want to see this.
We're going to go for it on fourth down. Yeah.
He broke the one, but, he was close on about three other ones, too.
Yeah.
Like, I would not kick the ball to Turpin. Now, look, Corey's not a good, he's not a good directional kicker, so it is what it is. But, that guy is just way too dangerous to put the ball in his hands.
Bajorquez is who he was talking about, the punter. He has a massive leg. When he connects on one, it is nuclear. But in Cleveland, with it windy, are you going to connect 100% every single time? And then you give that one didn't turn over. He didn't like it at all. And as soon as Turpin, these returners, as soon as they see it off the foot, they know if they have a chance or not. And when you're blocking for a guy like him, you're giving extra effort too because they think he can go every single time. That boosts the entire sideline, the entire locker room. A touchdown in the return game is vital. It is a game winner. I forget what the percentage is, but it's like 75% or something like that. I forget what it is. You win the game. You steal possession. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, it's bonus points. You can't ever go into the game and think, well, we're going to score 7 points on a punt return or a block punt or something like that or an interception return. You can't count on that. But when it happens, it's 7 bonus points or however many times it happens. Those are extra points that you don't count on. You're happy when they happen, but you can't go into a game and think, well, I'm going to score, on a 90-yard punt return. Like, that's just unrealistic. But when you get that, that's 7 bonus points that as long as you don't give them back, the other team doesn't have.
Okay, so let's talk about the bonus points and how you view games. I don't know all the preparation you did for this evening's Monday Night Football matchup, but how do you see this game going tonight? What should we look for if we were a Bill Belichick human being? How would we watch tonight's game, and what are we expecting?
Well, I think it's two very, very different preparation scenarios. Defensively, for the 49ers, you're looking at Aaron Rodgers, who didn't play last year on a team that you've never seen him play for, and you're kind of trying to project how he would look in Green Bay, how it would be with the Jets with different players and all that. I mean, that's a tough scenario. Now, one thing about the Jets is they do what they do, and they play. They don't really vary a lot from week to week. So I think that they'll just kind of play it out, and I don't expect them to do anything particularly special until they see how the game's going. But it's a tough game to prepare for. I would say on the other side of the ball for Coach Shanahan, Coach Shanahan knows where the Jets are going to be defensively, and he can attack them and really have a good plan on how to go after them. And if it were me, I would stay away from Williams. I would stay away from Mosley. I would try to get the ball outside as much as possible and run away from those guys and try to get the ball to the edge. They have a lot of trouble with the outside plays. Their ends getting cracked and that kind of thing. They don't really care about that. So I would be worried if I was the Jets about the ball getting to the perimeter of the formation a lot, whether it be to the receivers or McCaffrey or those guys. So it's it's an interesting matchup here, and I would say it'd be interesting to see how Rodgers and how that offense looks with him in it, because to me you got to stop the big three on offense. You got to stop Rodgers, you got to stop Hall, and you got to stop Wilson. So when we played the Jets, we doubled Wilson and we tried to put as many guys in the box as we could to stop the running game with Hall, but they didn't have Rodgers, so that makes it a little bit tougher. It's more of a challenge defensively for those guys.
What you just said there, we doubled Wilson, then we packed the box for Hall. Everybody says, Bill Belichick's going to make you win left-handed. He's going to he's going to eliminate your best player. And I'm assuming you've been told this, but players would feel like honored whenever they became the person. Like you went from Reggie to T.Y. And when T.Y. saw it the first time, obviously he did not do well that particular game, but everybody around him was like, hey, Bill knows you're the guy though. Like that's a cool thing. I think people almost saw it, I don't want to say as an honor, but it was a cool thing to kind of talk about. Christian McCaffrey's that guy for the Niners. And is that an accurate depiction of how you view teams and how you set up your defenses?
Well, it depends on the team, but I would say, with the Jets, I mean, you got to try to keep Hall from getting the ball, which is tough because they hand it to him. But, in terms of screen passes and things like that where they can get him the ball in the passing game, he's a very good receiver. I mean, I would do everything I could to keep it out of his hands. Wilson, you've got a much better chance of keeping it out of his hands because as a receiver, I mean, they can hand him the ball on a jet sweep or something, but there's not going to be very many of those. I would double Wilson and make sure that he doesn't kill you. And then the rest of your guys got to hold up. And we had a lot of success in, with Revis in 2014. We usually put Revis on the number 2 receiver and doubled the number 1 receiver. So we took away the number 1 guy with 2 players. But then if they threw to their second guy, they were throwing against Revis. So that was a pretty good matchup for us. And whoever the third guy was the third guy. We, I won't say didn't care about him, but we didn't care about him. But
beat us.
What happened was, we had one breakout party. We did that against Green Bay, all right, and we doubled the 2 guys there, Cobb and what's his name,
Jordy.
We doubled those 2 guys, and we said, well, we're going to take our chances on Devontae Adams. He really hasn't done much. And he killed us. He had about 125 yards in that game, and that was his coming out party, was when we tried to single cover him, and Rodgers found him, and they killed us. So, when they have too many weapons, you can't get everybody. But that was, that's one that, again, that's the greatness of Rodgers, is he finds where you're weak, and he usually can get you. And, of course, McCarthy, too, so... but yeah, that was a long day in Green Bay. Now, luckily, the season turned out okay, but that was a long day in Green Bay.
I assume you guys won it. Yeah, you guys won it that year.
we went out and we left Green Bay. We left Green Bay. Couldn't wait to get out of there and went out to San Diego and practice out there. Of course, it hadn't rained in San Diego in 50 years, but the week we got there, it had like 25 inches of rain or something. So we were practicing in mud puddles at the University of San Diego. It was kind of a rough. It wasn't ideal conditions, but it had so much rain out there. But yeah, that was we talked about crisis, situations for that year. That was kind of a crisis for us. We left Green Bay, went out to San Diego, and I'd say kind of the team really, came together, generated a lot of team chemistry, and we came back. We were a much better team the rest of the way. So, you never know how sometimes those games will turn out.
Go ahead, AJ.
How would you, Coach, if you were?
Excuse me, but Devontae should have sent me a check for that because his career took off after that game, and I never got a kickback on that.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. He's told his friends. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's told his friends.
Oh yeah, he might send you some of that Taco Bell money, Coach. Yeah,
he's got Taco Bell in his house.
His house, yeah.
In his house. Go ahead, AJ. Sorry.
He's doing pretty well. Let's say if you were running the 49ers defense tonight, you talk about quarterbacks. Like some quarterbacks, they say, oh, you need to blitz this guy. You need to get him off his spot, make him uncomfortable. Other guys, you want to sit back and pick him apart maybe and not let him kind of thread the needle. What would you do if you were a defensive coordinator facing Aaron Rodgers?
Well, I would say, first of all, the Jets have a really good cornerback that is, going to match up pretty well against most everybody. And he's a good tackler, too. So the perimeter of the formation, I think is pretty solid over there. Reed's done a good job for him. But I think if they go after anybody, they would go after Reed. The guy that, honestly, that worries me the most in there would be Mosley. And I would use Mosley. I would try to free Mosley up as much as possible, to read Rodgers and be able to help on the short and intermediate routes inside.